Hello everyone and welcome back to Video Editing for Mere Mortals. In today's lesson we're going to be learning how to work with the timeline and making some video cuts and edits for your very first video. And to do that we are going to be using a sample cartoon that I quickly had created. So let me bring that into the window for you to see. Let me make it large. So this is my sample video. It is available on the share drive in the link in the description on the video below. And we're going to go ahead and play the video so you can see what this raw footage looks like. So we have a guy walk out, he stretches, pauses, acorn falls from the tree, and then he's happy that an acorn fell. So what are we wanting to do with this video? Well, I can see at the very beginning there was a police officer that appeared and blinked in and out of the screen. So we're going to want to remove the police officer. And at the end, I also saw that there was a lady in the same area that appeared in the screen, and we'll want to remove her as well. Now, just for fun, what we're thinking about doing is when he's in here pausing before the acorn falls, I think it would be neat if he thought to himself and had a little thought bubble appear up here that of an acorn, and then when the acorn falls, the little thought bubble disappears, and that's when he walks over, and that's why he's happy, because he thought about the acorn and then saw it, and he's happy he got to see an acorn. So that's the plan. Let's go ahead and start making our edits. Okay, now that we have just seen the raw video footage, it's time to bring it into the VSDC video editor and begin to make those changes. First thing we need to do is load the video into the editor. This could be done several ways. You can come over here and click on add video and search for it. You can come into add objects under the editor tab and add a video object, or the easiest way, and the way I choose to do it, is just to drag it from wherever the raw video footage is and drop it down here on the timeline. Once you drop it, you can see it'll automatically place the video in the timeline going across the entire length of the layer that it's on, and it also shows it up here in your scene area. Now, before we go and make changes and edits, I'd like to first go over some various settings on the timeline and explain how the timeline works. Okay, the first thing I would like to note is that the little blue button here, you can slide along the timeline. Now the timeline lists from 00 to the end of the video, but it is not in seconds and partial seconds. It's actually listed in seconds and then frames. And wherever the position of this cursor is, you can see over here the time, which is the second, minutes or hours that your cursor is at, and then this is the number of frames after that second. So we are working on a 30 frame per second video settings on our project. So that means in between each of these seconds, it will go up to 30 and then go back to the next second. So you must realize that it's seconds and then frames. Now you also, let me reset this back to 0. If you click on the video and you look on your property windows, you can see over here that this object, our video, has a duration of 8 seconds and 9 frames, and that turns out to be a total of 249 frames. Up here at the object creation time, what this states is at what time on the timeline is this object going to be displayed. Right now it's at 0, meaning it's going to display immediately. It's going to be what's on the screen when the video starts. You can also reference it as frame 0. So if we want to add something in the beginning and delay the video from starting, we can change by either dragging this along the timeline, and now you can see there's going to be some blank time for 15 frames when the video plays, and then the video starts. And up here you can see the object creation time is at 15 frames. For this example, we're going to go ahead and leave it at 0. We want it to start immediately. Now, I did mention earlier that this is called a layer. VSDC is a non-linear video editor, which means you can have multiple items running at the same time on your videos, and that is done through layers. So currently we have one layer that is the video itself, and we can add additional layers and additional objects and build them up down here. We will do that when we are working with the Acorn thought bubble. So we'll be adding additional objects into additional layers. Now, some of the more important commands for the timeline are up here. And in this section is where you actually control how your previews and buttons or scene echoing works. So I'll do a quick overview of how these operate before we start making our first set of edits. Okay, the first item that I want to do is play the video. So we have our video sitting down here, and we need to look at it, see what's happening. So these two buttons here allow us to play the video. The first one does a pop out at a resolution so you can see what the video looks like at 1080p, we'll say, and I'll go ahead and hit play. Oops. Click on that, and you can see it does a pop out window at 1080p, and you can see what the results are of the video playing. Now, if you don't want to pop it out as a second window, or if you want to just view it quickly or view parts of the video, we have this little red play button where you can hit the play. Now it actually plays it within the scene editor. So instead of having to go out and view a pop-up, just simply click the play button here, and it will display and run inside the editor itself. Now, when the video was playing, you'll notice that this little pointer line here would scroll. This keeps track in the video of where the frame is that you're viewing while you're playing. You can also move it to wherever you would like. So if we wanted to start the video at the 4-second mark, we can move it to 4 seconds and hit play, and it'll start running from that point and go. Now, notice that when it ended, the cursor or the frame prompt went back to where I had hit the start button. This is due to this option button right here, return cursor to begin. So with this being turned on, it will automatically, when the video finishes playing, move the cursor back to where it started from, not necessarily from the beginning. So if we turn this option off and we hit play, it'll go through and stops at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this turned on, and I'm going to reset the time back to the 0 frame mark. Now, there is a concept called work areas. Right now, if we went and wanted to work with just a certain grouping of frames, we would have to take our slider here and then play with the settings by stepping through them, but you don't know where a hard cutoff is. So if you're wanting to play and loop through, if you're looking for a certain object or effect to happen at a certain frame rate, you would have to continually stop, reset, and go back. So the concept of a work area is, let's make this little partition of the video and we can work solely within that little section. And that is done by these little sliders that are kind of tucked away here in the beginning of the video. So what we basically need to do is set this work area to the frames that we want to concentrate in. This can be done either like you just saw me doing, dragging and creating the work area, or you can use these buttons up here to set it based on your cursor pointer location. So let's say we're going to start at 3 seconds. We can just put the cursor here, and instead of dragging and lining it up with that mark, we can come here and say, set the begin work area by cursor position. So by clicking this, it instantly moves the starting cursor to that point. Now the end cursor moved because it was to the left of the starting point, so it has to be, the end portion has to always be to the right of the starting point, obviously, so it moves it for you automatically. So now let's go to the 4-second mark, and again, as I'm dragging the current pointer, I can see what second I'm on over here. So now I'm at the 4-second mark. I can either drag the end piece over to 4 seconds, like that, or if I didn't want to do it that way, I could come up here and leave the cursor at 4 seconds and say set the work area by cursor position for the ending point, hit that, and now we have this cursor area. So we'll go ahead and move this over to the 3-second mark and hit play. And what you're going to see is going to possibly confuse you, because I hit play and it goes right past that mark. And you're probably asking yourself, why did it not stop at this ending point? Well, that is because we need to constrain our area, or our work area, to play only within this work area. And that is done by clicking this button, play work area only. So now if we click that button and highlight it, and we hit the play button, it will go and only play that certain subset. And if you need it to loop, you can click the loop button and you hit play, and it'll just keep looping over and over and over. So that's the basics of setting up a work area and limiting your scope to just a certain set of subframes. Okay. So if you're working with really large videos, you may need to zoom in on your timeline. We're working with a really short video. It's only 8 seconds long. So we can see the whole video and see pretty good detail within our timeline spacings. But if you're on a really large video, you can zoom in and increase the amount that you can view at one time by hitting the plus sign over here on the left. And this zooms it in so you can see that the area between our work area grew because it's now zoomed in a little bit more. And we can zoom in a little more. and it gives us more granularity on the ability to select certain frames within the work area. Now, if you zoom in too far, you can always hit this minus key to zoom out. Another nice feature is if you're wanting only to see on your timeline the work area you're working with, you have this button here that is got a little plus sign on it. It says set timeline scale by work area. When you click this, it zooms in so that your work area will start at the left and end on the right, and you get the most granularity between your start and end point. You can still zoom in further if you need to, but typically if you're working in a small area, using a zoom in for the timeline work area will work without issue. So we're going to go ahead and let me zoom back out to where we were. We can do a slider here. This button allows you to show the timeline as 100%. So this is returns it as if we just dropped the video. So by clicking that button, it zooms it all the way out, and you can see that we're back to where we started. So those are the basics of the timeline controls that we're going to be working with in order to make our changes. So with that said, let's go ahead and start working on making our first video edits. Okay, we're now ready to make our first set of edits. Now, if you remember when we were reviewing the video in the beginning of this lesson, the first thing we were going to do was remove a police officer that appeared at the very beginning of the video. So what I'm going to do first is just move this cursor back to the start, and I'm going to go ahead and reset my work area back to the start. So what we can do is, we know it was at the very beginning, we can hit play, and if you noticed how fast it appeared, it was pretty hard to catch what the time was on the line. So we can go ahead and click and move through, and we can see that on frame 8 he's not there, frame 7 he is. Now if you have difficulty clicking on the frame sets, again, we can zoom in. We don't have to be inside a work area. We can zoom into the area. Now you can see that each of these clicks will move it, and it's easier to see what frame spot you're moving it to. There's also this button up here, move cursor to the next frame. So if you're not zoomed in, you can use these two buttons to move the timeline frame by frame. So we are going to go ahead and mark where the officer disappears. So we're going to move frame by frame. This looks like he's almost gone. There's a little piece right there where he's still showing, and at this point he is gone. So at frame 9, the officer is gone. Now, since this is at the beginning of the video and we haven't had our man start walking into the video, we can go ahead and just delete everything from the beginning of the video to our cursor, and that will effectively remove the police officer. So in order to delete, there's several ways you can remove content from your video, but the way we're going to do it is you need to make sure that the video is clicked and highlighted, and come up here under the editor command, cutting and splitting. You'll see this little scissor for cutout fragment, and then we're going to drop it down. Now these 4 options, the cutout fragment and cutout content, I'm going to skip over now for a different lesson. The two that we're going to work with is going to be the trim start and trim end. What these do is when you do a trim, it takes where your cursor position is and will either cut everything from the cursor to the start or the cursor to the end. So if I said trim end at where my cursor is now, it will delete all of the video that we're wanting to save. So we're not wanting to do that. We're only wanting to trim off the beginning of the video up to that cursor. So if we select trim start and click that, notice that the video is now blank for the first 9 frames. That's because we cut the video out. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back to the beginning. And if we hit play, did you see how those first 9 frames were all blank? That's because the new starting position of our video never reset back to 0. It just removed those pieces, but the video still starts at the 9th frame. So let's just click on the video and we can drag it to the beginning. And now it starts at 0. Now, one of the issues with drawing or dragging and dropping is, notice it looks like I'm at the 0 point, but I'm not really because I have to scroll over because I'm zoomed out. An easy way to tell that this is not starting at the beginning is if we come over here to look at our object creation time, you can see that it's on the 2nd frame. So even though I drag the video to the left, since we weren't scrolled all the way to the 0 frame, it didn't reset it. So you need to be careful when you're moving items around if you're zoomed in and out of the time frame. And you can always check your object creation time. Now, we want it to start at 0 as normal. So I can either drag it or, as I said, I can come up here and say start at 0 frame. And you can see it jumps back to the 0 frame. So we're going to go ahead and move the cursor back to the beginning, hit play. There is no police officer. And he's happy, but we still have the lady at the end. So I am going to go ahead and click this button on the timeline to reset the timing or the display to be the entire video. And I'm going to go to the end of the video and find where the lady appears. So this is one of the areas where she appears. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to give me a little bit more room for working. She's gone in that video, or in that frame. Move to the next frame. You can see she's starting to appear right here. So we'll go back a frame. Now, again, since our cheering man has already disappeared, anything after this point of the video we don't need. So we can trim the ending off, and this will remove the lady from appearing. So to do that, again, we have our cursor at the point we want to trim. Click on the video to make sure it's highlighted. Come up to our cutting and splitting. The first time we did trim start because we wanted to keep everything to the right of the video. We wanted to remove everything to the left or of the marker. This time we're going to keep everything to the left of the marker and get rid of everything to the right. So by doing that, trim end, we will trim off the end of the video and effectively getting rid of the little lady that pops up. So we'll go ahead and click that. Notice the timeline shortened, and that part of the video is now gone. So I'm going to reset my timeline. Go ahead and start at the beginning. Hit play. No police officer. Stretches, pauses. Here comes the acorn, and now he cheers. and it ends, and there's no lady that pops up and appears. So we have now achieved 2 of our goals. Next, we're going to do the thought bubble and create a thought bubble for an acorn. So let's get ready to do some more advanced inserting of objects. Now we're going to add the thought bubble of the acorn to the guy where he's standing still and is paused right before the acorn appears. So to do that, we first need to locate where the pause is, and we're going to set a work area to limit the area we're viewing to just where we're wanting the tooltip to appear and disappear. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is mark our work area. So I'm just going to find the first frame where he is stopped moving. So I just found it by clicking. I did a pretty good random click there. And at this point, he has quit moving. So this would be a good point for having the thought bubble pop up. So to do the marking, we'll click here to set the work area beginning. To that, you can see the work area moves forward. And now we want to find where he starts moving again. All right, he's moving there, so we don't want the bubble to appear while he's moving. We want it to only be where he's standing still. So it looks like this is the last frame where he's standing still. I'm going to back it up one just to give a little 1 frame padding, and I'm going to set the end of my work area. So now, if we go to the beginning of our work area, hit play, you notice he doesn't move at all. So we're in a good position for putting the thought bubble in. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little onto my work area, center it up, just so I can see the details a little closer. Now, the next step is to add the thought bubble itself. For the thought bubble, we're going to be using a tooltip. So over here on the left-hand side are various objects you can add in, and here is the tooltip. So I'm going to go ahead and click tooltip, and it pops up a window asking where you're wanting to position it into your timeline. Now, there are many options we're not going to be using for quite a while. Ones that I want to just cover real quickly is from cursor position, which is highlighted by default, will basically cause the tooltip to start appearing where the cursor is and then continues on. To cursor position, if that one's selected, it basically will start at the beginning of the video and go up to the cursor. By work area seems to have an issue, so I'm not going to use that one. Sometimes it just doesn't put the object in the layers. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and say from cursor position. We'll cover lock, start, and end of positions at another point in a different video. Now, the final item is layer position. The only option we have available is to add a new layer. Now, if you recall, these items down here, each line is called a layer. Since it's a nonlinear editor, you can have stacks of objects within various layers. So we're going to add a new layer for this tooltip. So we're going to say, okay. Now we have our little plus sign, and we're just going to draw the tooltip up at the top. And there we go. Now, if you notice down here, it inserted a new layer, added a new layer called tooltip 1, and it went and drew the duration of it way past our ending position. So we don't want this tooltip to be shown to the end of the video, which is what it's indicating. Basically, this is saying start displaying this object at this frame, and then end displaying the object here, which is at the end of the video. We want it to be the same as our work area. So we're just going to back it up to the end of our work area. Now when we hit play, you can see it stops and repeats. So we're looking good, but this doesn't look like a tooltip. So what we're going to do is go back into the editor, and since we're highlighted on a tooltip, we have a tooltip styles options where we can select where we want our little tooltip pointer to go. So I'm going to have this first one selected, and now you can see it added the tooltip. We can resize it, make it a little larger, move it into a good spot. That looks good. Now, next, we're going to have a picture of a acorn. So we're not going to have any text. So let's highlight the tooltip and go over to our properties window. Now, down here is our text object settings, where we can have text. Here it says enter text. Now, if this was a regular tooltip, we can change the text, say hello, and it puts it in there. We don't want to have any text displayed, so we're going to go ahead and blank that out. So now we see nothing in the tooltip. The modes for this, you have simple text or text to subtitles. We'll cover subtitles in a different lesson, so we'll just leave these items alone. Text font is where you can change the font of the text, but since we're not displaying anything, we don't need to worry about any of these settings. Now, from the text colors down to the margins, again, these are all dealing with text. We're not having any text, as I said, so at this point we're not going to cover any of these items. I will be doing a separate lesson on working with text and adding various effects on the text items, so we will cover these in a different lesson in a lot more detail. Now, the bottom section is what is important to us. The first is round size. If you notice, it's a two values. If you click expand, you can see that it's built off of CX and CY. What these do is control the amount of rounding on the thought bubble. So what we're going to do is make the thought bubble a little more round. So I'm going to go ahead and change the CX to 40 and hit enter. You can see over here the part of the corner has been rounded off more. On just the x-axis, it looks a little wonky because only the x has been done. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the y to 40 and hit enter. Now you can see we have a nice rounded corner with more definition. But this text bubble is a little hard to see. So let me minimize that. What we have next is pen. The pen is actually what they're calling the border that goes around the outside. So it's a very light gray, and it's only set to a thickness of 1. So what I am going to do is select color, and I'm going to change it to a much darker shade of gray. Say OK. Now, you notice pretty much all you can see is right around the arrow of the tooltip has changed. Again, that's because the thickness is still at 1. So if we increase the thickness, you can see the border of the pen going around the tooltip gets thicker and more prominent. So I think that looks pretty nice at a nice little 9 thickness. So we'll click off of that. Now you can see we have a nice little border. I'm going to actually make this just a little bit more square. Now transparency, that is basically turning the border off, making it transparent, which is similar to saying thickness of 0. So we're wanting to leave it as no for transparency. Now the background, I want to have the background pop just a little bit more. So they have it down here as brush. Now we select the color. I'm going to turn it into a, let's see, nice bright yellow instead of that pale yellow. We'll say OK. And notice that now the inside of it is yellow. So I think that's a pretty good thought bubble. Now the next item we need to do is add the acorn image to the thought bubble. Now, again, just like with the video, you can do add objects. Over here, you can add an image and go out and select it, or you can just come out and drag onto the timeline where you're wanting it to place. Now, if you notice, it may be a little difficult to see, there's a red line saying this is where it's going to place the image in the layer. So if we place it at the bottom, we won't see the acorn. And I'll cover this in just a second. So let's go ahead and place it at the top. So now you can see that the acorn has been added. It is within our range work area, so the timing is good, but it's a little on the big side. So let's go ahead and shrink the acorn down and move it into the thought bubble. Now this image has been used with alpha channels, so it has transparent background. That's why you see the image is larger and going outside the thought bubble. That's not an issue because with it being transparent, it's not going to interfere with anything. Now, I was saying how ordering is important because what is on top layer is on top of the layers on the scene. And that may sound a little confusing, but think of it as stacking sheets of paper. Whatever is on the top sheet is what you're going to see. So whatever is on the top layer, the first sheet of paper, is what's going to be the most dominant object. And then that sits on top of what's on the second sheet, which sits on top of the third. So if I was to say, move the acorn, and you can just drag and drop it to a different area. Now the acorn's still there, but you can't see it because it's actually below the other two objects. One of the timeline items you have over here are these little eyeball signs. They actually will hide or display from the scene editor the various layers. So if I turn off the tooltip and turn off the video, you can see the acorn is there. It's just being covered up by the other two objects. So that is why we need to go ahead and make sure it stays at the top. So I'm going to add a new layer, and then move the acorn back to the top, and there we have it. Well, it's all shown nice and cleanly. So I'm going to remove the work area restriction, move this back to the beginning. Now we're going to hit the play button. So now the guy walks out, he stretches, there's the thought bubble, he sees the acorn, and now he dances. So this is basically non-linear because we're building objects on top of objects at different timelines. They don't have to be in sequential. And that is it. You've just added your first object and edited your first video. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, and we're going to now export it. Okay, now we have our video complete, and we're just going to go ahead and pop it out. Watch it here. He stretches. There's our thought bubble. Acorn falls. Yay! So now the next item is we have to get it out of the editor and into a file. VSDC allows that very easily by doing export project. So when you click export project, you come to the screen that has a lot of different variations for exporting. So you have formats based on PC. If you're wanting to do web formats, for example, for YouTube, it'll go through and it will make the video settings by default optimized for a YouTube upload. I am just going to leave it at PC and make it as a .mov file. Now, like you saw earlier, there are a lot of options. So if you come down to the bottom and you double click, you can see the various options. You can have different quality settings. These are like a quick select for the different profiles down below. Once you create settings that you like, if you modify them, then you can add them as your own personal profile by saving the profile into your selections here. You can change your different video codecs, how your sounds are, and everything else. For the purpose of this video being just our very first export, I'm going to leave all of these exactly as they are. I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to say OK, and up here I'm going to say export project. So as it exports, you'll see it happen in little chunks as it's being converted on the right hand side, and now it says the conversion is complete. So we now have the file that is exported. So I'm going to minimize my window and I'm going to go out, and here is the file acorn that we just created. Open it up, and here it is in its own free format where you can share it, email it, Twitter it, YouTube it, anything else. And that is it for this lesson. As always, I am going to have these files available on the share drive. The link is in the description below the video, and you can pull these files down and work with the graphics that I'm using. I am actually going to be keeping this video because in upcoming lessons we're going to just be adding on additional effects onto this video. So I'm going to take the result video and place it out there as well, so that the future videos that use it, you'll have it available. And I appreciate you for watching the lesson, and as always, please like, subscribe, and share and comments. Join the Discord. Link is in the description if you have questions, comments, or just want to chat about anything in general. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next class.